A timid young woman finds herself in the unexpected situation of visiting a gynecologist, leaving her in a state of shock. Her doctor, a young millionaire, falls deeply in love with her. Emma Carter's hands quivered as she grasped the clipboard, her fingers constricting around the pen. The waiting room of Hayes Women's Health Clinic exuded a pristine modernity, yet no amount of soft lighting or soothing melodies could quell the anxiety coiling in her stomach. She loathed her presence in this place. Her heart raced as she examined the intake form laid out before her. Name, date of birth, medical history, simple questions, yet her mind was a chaotic whirlwind. She brushed her damp palms against her jeans, summoning the strength to concentrate. Simply complete the form, Sophie. It isn't particularly difficult, yet it proved to be a challenge. Her entire life had been a careful dance around this moment, a relentless self-deception that she could forgo the necessity of a gynecologist's visit. After enduring weeks of unease and restless nights spent scouring the internet, which only intensified her deepest anxieties, she had ultimately succumbed. The receptionist spoke highly of Dr. Lucas Grant, declaring him to be among the finest in the city. At that moment, it hadn't crossed her mind significantly. In her eyes, a doctor was merely a doctor, an aged, solemn professional. Yet, nothing could have truly equipped her for the events that unfolded thereafter. A nurse entered the waiting room clutching a file in her hands. Emma Carter, negative. Sophie almost leaped in surprise. She swallowed hard, clutching her body as if it were a lifeline. Unsteady on her feet, she rose and trailed after the nurse along the corridor. As she walked by the sealed exam rooms, a wave of nausea washed over her, the sharp scent of antiseptic permeating the atmosphere. "Please, have a seat," the nurse said, her smile warm and inviting as she motioned toward a chair within the doctor's office. "Dr. Hayes will arrive momentarily." Sophie nodded, yet the air felt thick in her lungs, making each breath a struggle. She settled into her seat with a rigid posture, her spine aligned perfectly and her hands neatly folded in her lap. The room exuded a sense of orderliness. Certificates, elegantly framed, adorned the walls. A polished desk rested elegantly in the corner, and beside it, the exam chair stood ominously, reminiscent of a scene from a horror film. She made an effort to avert her gaze from it. Her fingers intertwined nervously as she practiced the words she would speak. "Maintain your composure, embrace the ordinary, persevere, and overcome this challenge." In that moment, Sophie lost the very essence of her breath. The man who entered was far from the image of a doctor she had conjured in her mind. Dr. Lucas Grant possessed an undeniable allure, lofty, robust, and strikingly attractive, with an air of ease. His dark hair fell in a casual disarray. His jawline was so defined it could slice through glass, and his deep blue eyes radiated a relaxed assurance. He was never meant to appear this way. Sophie's mouth felt parched. "Miss Bennett?" His voice flowed effortlessly, exuding a serene confidence and an air of professionalism. With a comforting smile, he closed the door softly behind him. Sophie attempted to respond, yet silence enveloped her. In that moment, her mind was consumed by a whirlwind of panic. He was in the bloom of youth, he possessed an undeniable charm, he was about to conduct an examination of her. Alas, what a calamity! Daniel settled into his seat opposite her, perusing the contents of her file with a measured gaze. "This appears to be your initial encounter with a gynecologist." Sophie nodded with such fervor that she nearly gave herself whiplash. Daniel wore a soft smile. "I understand that this may feel daunting, but I assure you, we will proceed at a pace that feels comfortable for you. Nothing unfolds unless you find yourself at ease." She nodded once more, her cheeks aflame. Daniel observed her tension, the way she averted her gaze, and how she seemed to wish to vanish into the chair. She stood apart from the other patients he encountered, shy and timid, exuding a fragility that awakened something deep within him. He inclined his body forward just a touch, his voice taking on a gentler quality. "How do you find yourself feeling today?" Sophie tightened her grip, her fingers intertwining with resolve. "Very well," she deceived. Daniel let out a soft, effortless laugh that resonated with warmth. "There's no need for you to feel anxious. I assure you, I'm not as frightening as I may seem." Sophie had a different perspective. He instilled fear. not due to his identity, but rather the emotions he stirred within her. Never before had she responded to anyone in such a way. Her heart raced, palms slick with sweat, and her body acutely attuned to his every movement. And what was the most dreadful aspect? Daniel observed. Her posture and gestures spoke volumes. Her deliberate evasion of his gaze spoke volumes. The rosy hue that adorned her cheeks. She possessed an undeniable charm. Daniel had encountered a myriad of patients, those brimming with confidence, others riddled with nerves, and even a few who engaged in unabashed flirtation. However, Sophie stood apart from the rest. Her fragility stirred a deep sense of caution within him. He'd always kept emotions separate from his professional life. Yet the way she gazed at him, her eyes wide and filled with uncertainty, stirred a deep instinct within him to shield her from harm. That thought was fraught with peril. He cleared his throat, shoving those emotions to the back of his mind. Concentrate, Daniel. You are a physician, not merely a man in a tavern. Before we begin, he said, his tone airy and casual, do you have any questions for me? Sophie paused, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. She was filled with a multitude of questions, yet each one perished silently within her throat. With a subtle motion, she simply shook her head. Daniel's eyes held her for a fleeting moment, as though he were attempting to unravel the mystery of her silence. Once more, a smile graced his lips. Very well. Let us begin. Sophie felt an undeniable certainty that this would be the longest appointment she had ever experienced. Sophie dashed out of the clinic that day, her heart racing with a mix of relief and anticipation. Her heart raced relentlessly as she navigated the bustling sidewalk, her palms slick with sweat, and her cheeks aflame with the remnants of embarrassment. Never before had she felt so utterly out of place in her entire existence. Dr. Lucas Grant was overwhelming. Excessively handsome, irresistibly charming, and undeniably intimidating. And the most painful aspect was that he had been kind, gentle, and understanding, which only deepened the hurt. For that reason, she found herself unable to feel anger towards him. She felt a deep frustration with herself. She felt a surge of anger at the way her stomach had twisted when he addressed her. She felt a surge of irritation as her skin tingled at the moment he extended his hand for a shake, fuming at how she had almost dissolved into a puddle on the floor, merely from gazing at him. Returning was not an option for her. Never, not even in a million years. Yet, as is often the case, destiny had different intentions. For the ensuing fortnight, Sophie turned a deaf ear to every call from the clinic. Her prescription required a revision. Indifference reigned. She had to arrange a follow-up. It simply will not occur. However, her symptoms began to deteriorate. No matter how much one might try to sidestep the issue, it would remain, steadfast and unyielding. Thus, she found herself once more in that familiar waiting room, her fingers clutching the arms of the chair, as if it were her only means of survival. In that moment, she found herself quietly hoping for a change, wishing for a different doctor to walk through the door. An individual of greater age, a person lacking excitement, a person who wouldn't cause her mind to short-circuit entirely. Yet, undeniably, life seemed to conspire against her. The instant the nurse summoned her name and guided her into the office, she found herself face to face with him once more. Dr. Lucas Grant, radiating an unfairly captivating charm as always. His gaze lifted from the file as she entered the room. Then a smile spread across his face. "Sophie," he remarked, as he shut the folder with a deliberate motion. "I began to wonder if you were intentionally keeping your distance from me." Her breath caught in her throat, he observed. Her stomach churned as she hurriedly settled into her seat, her eyes fixed firmly on the ground. I wasn't," she stammered, her words a tangled web of deceit. Daniel inclined his body forward, his arms finding a comfortable perch on the desk. His expression held a softness, a hint of amusement, yet it was tinged with curiosity. "You missed your follow-up," he remarked. "When we attempted to reach you by phone, there was no response." Sophie was engulfed by a sensation akin to death itself. "I simply got caught up," she murmured. Daniel was utterly unconvinced by her words. Yet he chose to overlook it. He observed her intently, taking note of how she nervously toyed with the hem of her sleeve and the tightness in her shoulders. Rigid. She felt a flutter of anxiety within her, She had felt that familiar flutter of nerves the last time as well. And somehow, that realization stirred a gentle warmth within him. He had encountered countless patients, yet none had left an impression quite like Sophie Bennett. She possessed an elusive quality that captivated those around her. It was something fragile, something that urged him to tread lightly, to proceed with caution, ensuring she felt secure in his presence. It was an odd sensation, indeed, an emotion he had not anticipated. Sophie in that moment fought against the encroaching darkness, desperately clinging to consciousness. Each passing second in this room was a torment beyond measure. She understood that he was merely fulfilling his duties, that his thoughts did not align with hers. Yet it was of no consequence. She needed to escape this place without delay. As soon as the appointment concluded, she dashed for the door, barely managing a murmured thank you before vanishing down the hallway. As Daniel observed her departure, an inexplicable pang of disappointment washed over him. He was taken aback by the unexpectedness of encountering her again so soon. Not beyond the confines of the clinic, not in an entirely distinct environment. Just a few days later, as he entered his beloved cafe to fetch a coffee before heading to work, his gaze fell upon a recognizable silhouette by the window, nestled comfortably with a book. Sophie. She had yet to lay eyes on him. Her attention was riveted on the novel laid out before her, as she occasionally tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, her lip caught between her teeth in deep concentration. In this moment, she exuded a serene tranquility. Distinct. She was no longer the bundle of nerves she had been in his office. For some inexplicable reason, Daniel found himself hesitating. In that moment, she transcended the role of mere patient, beyond the confines of a medical environment. More than merely a name on a file, yet, as an individual. As Sophie embarked on her journey, she felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. The world around her was alive with possibilities, each step echoing the whispers of her dreams. With determination in her heart, she ventured forth, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. He inhaled deeply and made his way over. "What a surprise to find you here," he remarked, casually leaning against the table. Sophie halted, her drink suspended in mid-air, her eyes widening in surprise as she glanced upward. For a brief moment, she simply gazed at him, as if her mind was still unraveling the reality of the situation. In that moment, she found herself choking on her coffee. Daniel struggled to suppress a chuckle. Sophie found herself yearning for an end to her suffering. For the second consecutive time, Dr. Lucas Grant had utterly taken her by surprise. Sophie clutched her coffee cup with fervor, her heart pounding from the unexpected sight of Dr. Lucas Grant, just outside his clinic. She had scarcely emerged from the shadows of her embarrassment. There he stood before her, an image of unshakable composure, his piercing blue eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. Hello," she stammered, her hand brushing against her mouth as she wiped it clean. With a light-hearted chuckle, Daniel settled into the seat opposite her, disregarding the need for an invitation. "I had no idea you were here," he remarked, his gaze sweeping across the cafe. "This is where I often find myself." Sophie took a deep breath, battling the rising tide of anxiety within her. She never anticipated encountering him here once more. Beyond the confines of a clinical environment, casually seated across from her, as if this were an everyday occurrence. In that moment, a comfortable silence enveloped them. For the first time, Sophie permitted herself to truly gaze upon him, to truly see him. He donned a tailored dress shirt, the sleeves casually rolled up to his elbows, showcasing his strong forearms. His watch gleamed with an air of luxury, and his entire demeanor radiated a refined elegance, embodying both affluence and self-assurance. He appeared as though he hailed from an entirely different realm than her own. And yet, there he sat, across from her, gazing at her as if she were the most captivating presence in the room. That notion filled her with dread. A few days later, Sophie's reality transformed once more. As she mindlessly scrolled through her phone, an article caught her eye, and a wave of dread washed over her. Dr. Lucas Grant, the affluent physician at the helm of Hayes Medical Group. She stood still, her body rigid. With her heart racing, she clicked on the article, her eyes growing wider with each word she read. Daniel transcended the role of a mere doctor. He was a distinguished doctor, a prominent figure in the field of gynecology, a trailblazer in women's health, overseeing numerous hospitals, including the very clinic she had frequented. Moreover, he possessed an immense fortune. Sophie struggled to catch her breath. His success was not the sole defining factor. Her naivety was striking. For a fleeting moment, she had allowed herself to believe that he was merely an ordinary individual. Yet, at that moment, the undeniable truth confronted her directly. Daniel Hayes was more than merely a charming doctor. He existed beyond reach. And what of her? She was merely Emma Carter, a girl of no extraordinary means, navigating the challenges of her everyday existence, grappling with the weight of her rent and seeking clarity in the chaos, one day at a time. They stood apart, distinct in their differences. They were nowhere near. Embracing that truth sooner rather than later would serve her well. Daniel began to perceive the transformation right away. Sophie was deliberately steering clear of him. Initially, he believed he was merely conjuring it in his mind. However, she began to disregard his messages, ceased visiting the cafe, ceased attending follow-up appointments. In that instant, it dawned on him that he could very well lose her before he had the opportunity to understand what this truly meant. Such behavior was utterly intolerable. On a particular evening, he discovered her presence. Sophie emerged from the bookstore, the weight of her bag resting comfortably on her shoulder as she stepped onto the sidewalk. The day's work behind her. There he stood, casually leaning against his polished black car, arms crossed, his gaze unwavering as it locked onto her. Sophie's heart soared into her throat. "Is that you, Daniel?" She let out a raspy sound. His eyes remained steadfast. "Are you deliberately steering clear of me?" His voice carried a serene composure. Yet beneath it all, there lay an unfamiliar sound, one she had never encountered before. Sophie averted her gaze. "No, I've simply been occupied." Daniel let out a breath, moving in closer. "Sophie," he murmured, his voice now barely above a whisper. "Do not deceive me." Her fists tightened into hard knots. "What is the significance of this?" she inquired. "You're uniquely yourself, and I am who I am. We hail from utterly distinct realms, Daniel. And she swallowed with difficulty. "I refuse to be perceived as someone who is merely pursuing you for your wealth." Daniel gazed at her intently, the silence stretching between them. In that moment, he let out a hearty laugh. It was not an act of mockery. It was not an act of cruelty. Yet, it was a true sense of disbelief. Sophie sensed a warm flush rise to her cheeks. "What is it that brings you to laughter?" Daniel shook his head, a gentle expression crossing his face. "Because Sophie," he murmured, "it seems you are the first individual in my life who has ever distanced themselves from me due to my wealth." Sophie's lips parted, yet silence enveloped her. For the first time she noticed it, the weariness in his gaze, the way he regarded her, not as a physician, not as a wealthy man, but as a person earnestly seeking to comprehend her. In that moment, doubt crept in, and she found herself questioning her desire to run. Sophie made every effort to maintain her distance from Daniel. She steered clear of the cafe. At first, she declined his invitations with grace, but as time went on, her refusals grew more resolute. She turned a blind eye to the messages he sent, inquiring about her well-being, even as each one tugged at her heart, filling her with a deep sense of guilt. Yet, despite her relentless efforts to block him from her mind, there remained an undeniable truth she could not escape. Herself. Each time his name illuminated her phone screen, her fingers tingled with the urge to reply. Each time she strolled by the clinic, she found herself battling the urge to peer inside. Each time she shut her eyes at night, his face appeared before her, his voice echoed in her mind, and she could almost feel the warmth of his presence surrounding her. And that filled her with dread. For Daniel Hayes was not merely a man she could allow herself to love. He was a person in whom she could completely immerse herself. And that was far more terrifying than the thought of him turning his back and leaving. Thus, Sophie resorted to the only course of action she was familiar with. She fled with urgency. Yet, Daniel was not one to surrender without a fight. Initially, he allowed her the distance she needed. He granted her the space to reflect, to reconcile with whatever this connection was that existed between them. As the days morphed into weeks, and Sophie continued to keep him at bay. He realized that action was imperative. Thus, he ceased his pursuit of her. Instead, he merely made his presence known, not through grand gestures or dramatic flair, but rather in the subtle, quiet moments that often go unnoticed. In the quaint bookstore where she spent her days, he would sometimes wander in, feigning interest in the shelves, while effortlessly engaging her in light-hearted dialogue. In the cafe, he occupied his familiar corner, a silent figure lingering at the edge of her vision, never intrusive, simply existing in the moment. Gradually, it came to fruition. Sophie ceased her avoidance of him. She ceased to offer justifications. On one particular day, she unexpectedly found herself laughing at something he had said. A heartfelt, authentic laugh. For the first time in weeks, Daniel noticed a fissure in her defenses. Yet, just as Sophie began to find her footing, starting to entertain the notion that perhaps this challenge was not as insurmountable as she had believed, an unforeseen event unfolded, altering the course of everything. The hour was late. She lingered at work longer than she typically would, her head throbbing, her limbs weighed down by fatigue. All day, she had been battling an unshakable sense of unease, yet she forged ahead, convincing herself it was merely a touch of fatigue, that relief awaited her at home. Yet, as she set foot on the sidewalk, the world seemed to shift beneath her. Her sight became a haze, her knees gave way beneath her. Suddenly, darkness enveloped everything. Suddenly, she found herself enveloped in a comforting warmth. The rhythmic beep of a monitor echoed softly in the background. With a gradual flutter, she opened her eyes, only to find herself face to face with the very last person she had anticipated. Daniel. He sat beside her hospital bed, elbows resting on his knees, his face etched with concern. As his gaze fell upon her open eyes, a sharp breath escaped him, relief washing over his face. "Sophie," he whispered softly. "You truly frightened me to my core." Her throat felt parched. "What is happening? What transpired?" "You collapsed on the street," he said, his voice strained. "An onlooker summoned an ambulance. Upon discovering your presence here, he swallowed hard and rushed over as quickly as possible." Sophie blinked deliberately, attempting to absorb the weight of his words. He arrived for her. He had forsaken all for her. In an instant, the walls she had meticulously constructed, the justifications she had woven to keep herself distant from him, lost their significance. Sophie stirred from her slumber, greeted by the gentle illumination of hospital lights and the faint hum of conversations drifting in from the corridor. Her body felt weighed down, her limbs languid, yet it was the comforting warmth beside her that compelled her to turn her head. It was at that moment that she caught sight of him. Daniel. He sat beside her bed, his elbows propped on his knees, fingers intertwined in a thoughtful clasp. His typically sharp, self-assured features were etched with fatigue and worry. His dark hair was tousled, as though he had been running his fingers through it in a moment of restless thought. As her eyelids gently parted, he released a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. A wave of relief washing over his features. "Sophie." His voice resonated with a deep, unrefined quality. "You truly frightened me to my core." Sophie blinked languidly, her thoughts gradually aligning with the present moment. "What transpired, I wonder?" Her throat felt parched, and her voice came out faint. Daniel inclined his body ever so slightly, as if drawn by an invisible force to bridge the distance. "You fell to the ground, succumbing to the weight of the world around you." His fingers clenched into a tight fist. "A high fever enveloped you. Dehydration coursed through your veins. Fatigue weighed heavily upon you, and you found yourself straining against the limits of your endurance." Sophie swallowed hard, attempting to rise, but he was instantly at her side, his hands firm and reassuring, providing the support she needed, and for the very first time she beheld it. "Do not feel sorry. There is no responsibility." Yet, it was something altogether different. Something tender. Fierce. Steadfast. Authentic concern. Her chest constricted with a sharp, agonizing pressure. His presence here is unwarranted. He ought not to gaze at her in such a manner, for if he were to do so, She could begin to accept it as truth. She could begin to entertain the notion that a man like him, possessing everything, might genuinely desire someone like her. She simply could not bear the weight of such heartbreak. Thus, she followed her usual course of action. She forcefully shoved him aside. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel furrowed his brows. "What is this?" Sophie willed herself to divert her gaze. "This isn't something you must undertake." His jaw tightened. "What should be done?" She gestured weakly around the room, her voice barely above a whisper. "Taking care of me. Sitting here all night, acting like I matter." Daniel's whole being froze in place. Then, a shadow crossed his face. "Sophie," he murmured, his tone dropping to a piercing whisper. "Do you really believe I'm here simply because I have to be?" She parted her lips only to seal them once more. Oh, indeed, that was precisely what she believed. That thought filled her with dread. She was determined not to become his burden. She refused to be the girl he pitied. With great resolve, she compelled herself to utter the words, "Your charity is unnecessary, Daniel." His eyes sparkled with an intensity she had never encountered, a blend of frustration, anger, and something far more profound. "This isn't charity, Sophie," he said, his voice taut with tension. "This is my way of showing you that I care." She released a brief, airy chuckle. "What is the reason behind this?" Daniel's fingers curled tightly at his sides. "What do you mean by that? Why am I the one chosen for this?" she murmured softly. "All that you desire is within your grasp: wealth, triumph, and the adoration of women who would go to great lengths to be by your side." Her throat constricted. "What brings you to this place?" His breath caught in his throat. At last he uttered the words, "It is because of my fondness for you, Sophie." Sophie's heart froze in that moment. The words lingered in the air, dense and inescapable. Yet just as she began to grasp the reality of the situation, doubt surged within her, overwhelming her once more with a wave of fear. She shook her head, her fingers tightly clutching the hospital blanket. "No," she said, her voice trembling on the edge of breaking. "That is illogical." Daniel's jaw clenched with tension. "Why not indeed?" Sophie gulped, a sharp pain gripping her chest, for she murmured softly, "You possess it all, while I am left with nothing." Her voice quivered. "My lord, how can I possibly trust that you truly require my assistance?" Stillness. Daniel's eyes remained steadfast. For the first time, Sophie glimpsed a fracture in his gaze. In that moment, clarity dawned upon her. Perhaps she was not the sole one harboring fear. Daniel inhaled deeply, his hands clenching into tight fists before gradually relaxing. He remained silent for what felt like an eternity. He gazed at her, his blue eyes probing, filled with conflict, revealing a vulnerability she had never encountered before. Then, he began to speak. "You believe I possess it all," he whispered, his tone calm yet subdued. "My life is flawless. I am unfamiliar with the sensation of inadequacy." Sophie furrowed her brow, a constriction forming in her throat. "Is it not?" Daniel exhaled sharply, a sardonic chuckle slipping from his lips. He shook his head in disbelief. "Indeed, Sophie, it is not." She gazed at him, taken aback by the intensity in his voice. To her, Daniel had always been an enigma. Untouchable, successful, wealthy, and brimming with confidence. Yet, in this moment she found herself witnessing something entirely different. A fragment shattered, something genuine. "I wasn't always like this," Daniel continued, his hands rubbing together absent-mindedly. "I navigated my way through medical school, fueled by scholarships and the dedication of part-time jobs." Sophie held her breath, observing him as he spoke, not with his customary confidence, but with a sincere honesty that tugged at her heart. "Upon finally earning my title as a doctor and stepping into the realm of genuine financial success, I believed I had reached the pinnacle of achievement. I believed, this is the moment, I have followed every step correctly." His voice sank to a hushed whisper. "It was then that I encountered someone remarkable." Sophie's stomach knotted in a tight coil. Her beauty was captivating, intelligent, all that I believed I desired. And she declared her love for me. Daniel's jaw tightened. I placed my trust in her words. Sophie was acutely aware of the direction this was taking, yet she found herself unable to resist the urge to softly recount the events that unfolded. Daniel exhaled, slowly. "She didn't love me," he said, his voice a blend of softness and edge. "She cherished my wealth." Sophie experienced a sharp constriction in her chest, a painful reminder of her anxiety. Daniel cast a fleeting look her way, his face a mask of inscrutability. "I discovered that she had been involved with another person without my knowledge. That all her words, every moment we shared, was merely a performance." Sophie inhaled sharply. Words eluded her, for this was not the Daniel Hayes she had envisioned. This was not the ideal self-assured physician. He was a man marked by betrayal, wounded deeply, carrying scars invisible to the world around him. Exactly like her. "I haven't truly allowed anyone to get close since that time," Daniel confessed, his fingers nervously massaging the back of his neck. "I reassure myself that it's unnecessary. It is simpler this way." He lifted his eyes to meet hers, his stare searing with intensity. Yet, everything changed when our paths crossed. Sophie stood motionless. Her heart ceased to beat. In an instant, all else faded away. The hospital, the memories, the dread. It was merely the two of them, enveloped in the silence of an unvoiced truth that lingered in the air. Sophie swallowed hard, searching for the words that eluded her. "Daniel." He shook his head in disbelief. "No, allow me to complete my thoughts." He advanced a step nearer. Sophie's throat constricted. Daniel advanced another step, positioning himself directly before her, close enough that she could sense the warmth emanating from him. "I don't care what you possess or lack," he declared, his voice thick with emotion. "Your lack of wealth is of no concern to me. Your belief that you're not enough holds no weight with me." His fingers grazed hers, tentative and hesitant, as if he were offering her the opportunity to withdraw. She did not. "All that matters to me," he whispered, "is you." Still, beyond, the city lights shimmered against the inky sky, a gentle murmur of the night enveloping the stillness that lay between them. And then the tale unfolds. Daniel gently cradled her face, lifting her chin until their gazes intertwined. "I desire you, Sophie," he murmured. "Only you." Sophie's breath caught in her throat. For the very first time, she allowed herself to embrace the possibility of it. Sophie lay awake that night, her gaze fixed on the ceiling, her heart ensnared in a tumult of emotions she found impossible to unravel. Daniel's words reverberated in her thoughts, gentle yet indelible. "I desire you, Sophie. Only you." For far too long, she had clung to the notion that she was insufficient, that her existence was merely mundane, that love was never destined for someone of her kind. And yet, despite all odds, Daniel had chosen her anyway. Yet, was she capable of achieving it? Could she allow herself to embrace this, to have faith in him? The ensuing days unfolded in a tempest of uncertainty. Sophie refrained from reaching out to him, sidestepping the choice that loomed before her, despite the undeniable truth she harbored within. For the reality was that when she envisioned her existence devoid of Daniel, it seemed hollow, frigid, as if a vital piece were absent. As if he were absent, and that filled her with a deeper fear than the thought of succumbing to her feelings for him. Meanwhile, Daniel remained in a state of anticipation. He refrained from pushing, avoided demanding an answer, and never attempted to coerce her into a decision she wasn't prepared to make. For he was well acquainted with Sophie. He understood that she required space. Despite the pain it caused him, he was prepared to grant her that wish. For the promise of her presence at the journey's conclusion, she was undeniably worth every moment of anticipation. Yet, Sophie knew she couldn't escape indefinitely. In that instant, her mind went blank. She failed to consider the repercussions. Without a moment's pause, what consumed her thoughts was the undeniable urge to be in his presence. Thus, she took off in a sprint. Amidst the throng of bustling sidewalks, beneath the glow of the city lights, her heart raced in rhythm with each determined step she took. At long last, she arrived at his clinic. She flung the doors open, her breath coming in quick gasps as she surveyed the reception area. Searching for, she caught sight of him, at the far end of the corridor, engaged in conversation with a nurse. At the sound of the door, Daniel turned, his brows knitting together in surprise. Yet, before he could utter a single word, Sophie was already in motion. directly to him, directly into his embrace. For the first time, she unleashed her true self. Before Daniel could fully comprehend the moment, Sophie enveloped him in her embrace, pressing her face into his chest, holding on to him, as if he were her sole anchor in a tumultuous sea. His body stiffened in surprise for a fleeting moment. Then he surrendered to her embrace. His arms enveloped her, firm and unwavering, cradling her as if he intended to hold her forever. Sophie pressed her eyes tightly closed, her words barely audible as they were muffled against his shirt. Men kong muon tron che nua. Daniel's breath caught in his throat. In that instant, clarity washed over him. Indeed, she had made her choice of him. She had made her choice. In that moment, the rest of the world faded into insignificance. Sophie had never imagined finding herself in this moment. Enveloped in the embrace of a man who had once felt unattainable, her heart rhythmically aligned with his. Yet here she was, enveloped in the stillness of Daniel's office, his arms a steadying presence, and in that moment, she understood. This was not a mere figment of imagination. This was indeed reality. For the very first time in her existence, she felt no fear of it. Weeks slipped by, seamlessly blending into the fabric of time. As time passed, the weeks seamlessly transformed into months. In an unexpected turn of events, Daniel emerged as her sanctuary. Lingering doubts clung to her, and there were fleeting moments when the insidious voice in the recesses of her mind murmured that she fell short of being enough. Yet, whenever that fear began to seep in, Daniel stood by her side, gently and consistently reminding her of her existence. That was her essence, unwavering and constant. A year had passed, and Daniel led her once more to the very cafe where their journey first unfolded. Initially, Sophie paid little mind to it. It was only when she noticed the anxious manner in which he was toying with his coffee cup that realization dawned on her. It was only when he extended his hand, his thumb gently drawing languid circles upon her skin, that the moment truly began. It was only when he sank to one knee, right in the heart of the cafe, a small velvet box cradled in his hand, that the essence of his love shone through his eyes. Sophie inhaled sharply, her heart caught in her throat. Daniel looked up at her, a gentle smile gracing his lips, his voice tender yet imbued with unwavering confidence. "Emma Carter, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Her vision was obscured by tears. A year prior, she would have fled. Yet, at that moment, a singular answer emerged. Affirmative. The cafe burst into jubilant cheers. Yet all Sophie could perceive was the rhythmic thrum of her own heartbeat and the steadfast, unyielding vow reflected in Daniel's eyes. Regardless of the circumstances, they had discovered one another. From that moment on, solitude would no longer be a companion for either of them. In an unexpected twist of fate, Sophie and Daniel's journey unfolded, beginning with a chance encounter in a doctor's office and blossoming into a love that neither had anticipated. There was a time when she believed she fell short. He had once believed that his heart would remain forever closed. Yet, love discovered them regardless. It is not found in extravagant displays or flawless instances, but rather in the calm, unwavering companionship of a person who chose to stay. Ultimately, love transcends the notion of perfection. It revolves around the continuous act of selecting one another, time and time again. Did this tale resonate with your emotions? If you cherished the journey of Sophie and Daniel, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. We present you with poignant, deeply resonant tales that will linger in your heart long after the final sentence. Press that subscribe button and activate notifications to ensure you never overlook a tale that resonates with you. Until we meet again, hold on to your faith in love, in new beginnings, and in the enchantment of the unforeseen. Until we meet again in the next tale.